Hello and welcome to New Wave Global. This is Raza Rumi. I'm back with another video. So, Pakistan's southern province, Balochistan, also which happens to be the largest province territory wise, is burning. And who is fueling the flames? That is something we will explore in this video. And unfortunately, the province has been bleeding again and again. Last week, armed gunmen stopped passenger buses on the highway, separated 9 people, and based on their identity, they were executed in cold blood. They happen to be from Punjab, the largest and most populous province, and that is seen as some kind of a threat for the Baloch insurgents or the separatists who often resort to violent tactics to push their point forward. But this is not a new incident. In April 2024, an ambush in Noshki district also killed 9 Punjabi origin passengers who were also pulled off from the bus and after ID checks were killed. The BLA, Balochistan Liberation Army, claimed the responsibility. And earlier, in November 2024, a suicide bombing at Quetta railway station killed 32 people, one of the deadliest civilian targeted blasts in Balochistan. And again, the BLA took responsibility. And in March 2025, earlier this year, Jafar Express, a passenger train, was hijacked in the mountainous stretch of Balochistan, very much like from a thriller film. The train was stopped. The insurgents used IEDs, sniper fire, and hostage taking, killing dozens. Pakistani forces launched Operation Green Bolan, rescuing hundreds, but of course there were casualties on both sides. And in May 2025, a suicide bomber rammed an explosive-laden vehicle into a school bus in Gwadar, killing 10 people, including children. Pakistan accused BLA of orchestrating it, and of course, these incidents were not just the only ones. There's a long list. I won't go into those. I just highlighted a few in recent years just to press the point how serious this issue is. These tragedies are part of a consistent escalation in scale, sophistication, and deadly targeting of civilians across the Balochistan province. But who is behind this violence? What are their demands? And why is India once again in the spotlight for sponsoring terror inside Pakistan, as Pakistan claims and accuses its neighbor? And let's look at the tangled web of Baloch insurgency, its actors, and what lies ahead. So, a grim recap as I gave you from this week, when the passengers were killed. Of course, they were at the wrong place at the wrong time, but this is mirroring countless attacks in the past. Now, Balochistan, before we go on to what is happening, let me also add the other dimension where the Chinese are working. So the Chinese workers have been assaulted, railway lines have been blown up, and suicide bombings in urban centers basically have created an environment where there's complete breakdown of security, and the federal and the provincial governments are struggling to not only bring back a semblance of security, but also to establish the writ of the state. Now, these separatist groups, the BLA and the others, they operate with increasingly bold style and manner, where they also leverage digital platforms for propaganda. And of course, Pakistan accuses that they received sophisticated arms and funding from foreign backers. The roots of the conflict in Balochistan go deep. Since the 1948 accession of Balochistan to Pakistan, many Baloch nationalists have felt marginalized and excluded. The province remains underdeveloped despite being rich in natural resources, gas, minerals, including gold, and now potentially rare earths. there have been 5 insurgencies since the independence of Pakistan in 1947. Each time, the Pakistani state has responded with force, but with each cycle, the violence has returned more deadly, more complex. And now, it's not just a domestic conflict, it has become an international conflict, or at least with international dimensions. Initially, yes, rooted in political grievances, it has now morphed into a tangled mix of ethnic nationalism, regional geopolitics, and a proxy battleground between larger powers. And that is what Pakistan is grappling with. And but before we go on further, let's look at some of these groups, the separatists or the insurgents and the violent groups, and who are they and what do they want. So the BLA is the most well known and has been designated a terrorist organization by Pakistan, the United Kingdom, and even the United States. The group seeks an independent Balochistan and opposes any perceived exploitation of Baloch resources, especially by foreign powers like China. Then there's the BLF, which is like a liberation front, which also seeks separation through armed struggle. The BRA, linked to exiled leader Brahamdagh Bugti, has operated from abroad and has openly appealed for Indian support in the past. So, their demands, as I highlighted earlier, are independence, control over resources, and an end to what they describe as Punjabi military occupation. Now, Punjab, as I mentioned, is the larger, more populous province, which also supplies most of the soldiers in Pakistan Army, and therefore is a target of both violence and hate. So, many of the cadres in these insurgent groups are disillusioned youth, often from areas where you don't have many facilities or schools or opportunities, making them a prey for radicalization. Now, let's look a bit into India's role, which is covert but crucial to understand. Pakistan has been accusing India of stoking this insurgency. Intelligence officials claim RAW has provided funding, arms, and training to separatist groups via networks in Afghanistan and the Middle East. The most high-profile case, Kulbhushan Jadhav, a former Indian Navy official arrested in 2016 in Balochistan. Now, what does Pakistan say? He entered through Iran using a fake passport. He was sent by the Indian Premier Intelligence Agency RAW to organize terror networks and sabotage the China-Pakistan economic corridor. And his confessional video admits to espionage and terror facilitation. His network reportedly, as per Pakistani authorities, stretched from Iran to Balochistan, with efforts focused on fomenting unrest and orchestrating attacks on strategic assets like the Gwadar port. India, of course, denies these claims, saying Yadav was abducted from Iran and that his confession was forced. But Pakistan took the case to the International Court of Justice, which stayed his execution but acknowledged jurisdiction, giving weight to the gravity of this case. Now, of course, these are Pakistani states, allegations, and India does not agree. But earlier, in 2009, at the Sharm el-Sheikh moot, there was a declaration issued by the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Pakistani Prime Minister Yusuf Raza Gilani, who issued a joint statement acknowledging Pakistani concerns about India's alleged involvement in Balochistan. Just as India accuses Pakistan of sponsoring terrorist activity in Kashmir, Pakistan likewise mentions India's role in Balochistan. Now, the problem is that this has made the entire Baloch conflict more and more complicated. because now we have the China factor, where China is putting in billions of dollars into what is known as the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is part of the larger Belt and Road Initiative. Now, before we go to China, there's another key player in this complex game, namely Afghanistan, a failed state under perennial conflict, which the Baloch insurgents have used to plan and launch attacks inside Pakistan. With the fall of Kabul and the rise of the Taliban, who recaptured the Afghan state, Pakistan had hoped these sanctuaries would shut down, or at least the Afghan government would take some action, but intelligence reports suggest otherwise. In fact, Pakistan has repeatedly raised this issue with the Taliban leadership, and we need to also understand, why is Afghanistan involved? It's partly ideological, partly, keeping some leverage over Pakistani state, and dynamics of cross-border tribal affiliations and some sort of, control over Pakistan's policy. Because some of the former Northern Alliance and now disbanded Afghan intelligence network had forged deep ties with Baloch insurgents. And as we know, Balochistan is being now a target of violence by both Afghanistan and India, according to Pakistan's assessment. And it has very much to do with the perennial insecurity that has afflicted the region. Now, let's get to China. Now, Chinese investments and nationals have also been a target by the insurgents. BLA has launched multiple attacks on Chinese engineers and infrastructure. In 2021, for example, a suicide bombing targeted a Chinese convoy in Gwadar. In 2022, another attack in Karachi University killed Chinese language instructors. The insurgents view China as a colonial power, helping Pakistan exploit Balochistan. But the irony is that these attacks also deter investment, stall development, and hurt local people the most. In their opposition to the CPEC, the insurgents claim to resist exploitation, but their violence has pushed Gwadar locals into deeper insecurity, economic stagnation, and perennial fear. Let's be very clear, violence against civilians, especially targeting poor laborers and non-combatants, must be condemned unequivocally. There is no moral or political justification for kidnapping passengers of buses or detonating bombs in public places. These are plain acts of terror that hurt Balochistan's own people and weaken its case for political rights within the Federation of Pakistan. At the same time, Pakistan's response to the insurgency cannot just be militaristic. The reliance on force alone has not brought peace, and in some cases it has alienated the very people the state needs to win over. And that's a dilemma for Pakistan. Intelligence operations have to be sharpened, yes, but they also require local support. Without local support, you can't really track these insurgents and their activities and the cross-border movements. So no insurgency can succeed without the trust and cooperation of the people on the ground. And this has been a global experience, whether Colombia or many other parts where states have successfully dealt with these local insurgencies. So we must confront an issue that has plagued Balochistan for years, which is the crisis of missing persons. Thousands of Baloch families claim their loved ones have been forcibly disappeared, which is basically being picked up by security forces, almost always never to return. This has created deep mistrust between the people and the state, and it fuels resentment that insurgents groups easily exploit. Unless there's truth, accountability, and justice in these cases, a meaningful peace process will remain elusive. Pakistani state must move beyond denial and foreign interference and address this pain, not just for political stability, for basic human dignity, and to fulfill the constitutional mandates which the Constitution of Pakistan deigns upon the Pakistani authorities to fulfill. Ultimately, Pakistan has to confront with this insurgency with a dual lens. Firmness against violent extremism, yes, there can be no two opinions about that, but openness to political dialogue. The Baloch people deserve development, dignity, and inclusion, not just military garrisons and mega projects. If the state truly wants to integrate Balochistan, it must empower its people and win them over and not silence them through force and other means. So, I guess the real question here is, will the Pakistani state now adopt this strategy, a twin track strategy of winning over the local political support as well as undertaking counter-insurgency measures? So, the purpose of this video was that the next time you hear about violence in Balochistan, the largest province of Pakistan, neighboring Afghanistan and Iran, remember, it's not just a local rebellion. It's a war of narratives, very strong interests, and geopolitics. And unless justice and dialogue return to center stage, Balochistan's tragedy will keep repeating itself. Thank you, and I'll be back with another video. Bye for now.